I'm fairly certain that IGN's review of Hogwarts Legacy just exposed the entirety of gaming journalism. What is going on, Tenant Crew? My name is Billy the Squid, and Hogwarts Legacy is a game that is going to go down in one way or another, whether it's infamy or fame, for just how much of a buzz a single video game can generate in the modern day. If you're somehow not familiar with what I'm talking about, Hogwarts Legacy is the newest game set in the Harry Potter universe, a universe that has not been represented extremely well within the video game space outside of the Lego Harry Potter franchise. And at first glance, it seems like Harry Potter fans are finally getting a video game that is being pretty well received, with it sitting at an 84 across most platforms. But unfortunately for this game, and I'm sure you all are familiar with all of the controversies that have been going on with this game, the rating system and gaming journalism in general has completely dissolved. Any form of unbiased review seems to be few and far between, and this has turned more into a litmus test for the gaming space and for gaming journalism in general, more so than it is reviewing a game based on what the game is. And the bias for this game has shown its head on many fronts, one of which being the lack of critical reviews that the game's actually received, with it having 66 reviews total on the PS5, 15 on the Xbox, and a measly 12 total on the PC, which is widely regarded as the worst version of this game. This is due to Unreal Engine 4 and the multitude of issues that that engine has had on the PC front these days, but the fact that there's only been 12 critical reviews on this platform, I find extremely concerning for the PC player base overall. Compare this to God of War Ragnarok, who had 141 critical reviews total. And the lack of reviews overall is concerning because it comes in a multitude of different fronts on that aspect as well, with some review codes just not going out to major game review sites. I believe Skill Up was one of the largest and most notable ones to not receive a review copy of this game, but it goes even further with people outright just refusing to review the game because of the J.K. Rowling controversy that is tied to it. And for the people that are refusing to review the game, I have little to no problem with this. You have the option to purchase a game. You should have the option to review a game, and I don't see any issues with somebody not wanting to review a game if it doesn't sit to their morals. There are other large review entities such as Game Informer, which are still having a review in progress about this game, but despite getting the early copy of the game and having that review embargo lifted several days before even the early access came out. And lastly, you have articles such as the one from Games Hub that says that Hogwarts Legacy does not deserve to be reviewed on its own merits, or the one by Wired magazine that gave it a 1 out of 10 in a scathing review that, while it does list some of the actual problems with the game, was more heavily handed towards the controversy that the game has brought about. And speaking of the controversy, this is the last I'm going to mention of it, because this isn't a review about the Hogwarts Legacy controversy or J.K. Rowling or anything like that. This is a breakdown of how the entire review system in gaming journalism has broken down simply because of a controversy in gaming. The facade of fair and balanced gaming journalism has been basically dissolved entirely, at least with this game in particular. And I feel like IGN's review of the game exemplifies exactly how bad it has gotten, with the pieces of the puzzle not equaling the intended outcome. And it goes to show that I don't think there is much merit, or at least minimal merit, in number-based review systems these days. So let's jump into that IGN review article itself and kind of get to what I'm getting at here. Starting off with one of the very first things that they say about Hogwarts Legacy. Yes, it is a Hogwarts game. Yes, it is set in the beautiful Harry Potter universe. And yes, it is as full of as many plot holes as one would expect from this universe. And you are basically just told to accept it. To quote the article specifically, Legacy's plot has more holes than a fishnet stocking, and sorta it just expects you to accept that its magical world makes no sense. It goes on to say that if you're like me, you'll roll your eyes during moments that you're introduced to 100 years worth of dead characters lecturing you from paintings about the importance of some stuff that happened a long time ago and how you have to save the world or whatever isn't a good groundwork to set, especially when you're talking about the groundwork of your game in particular. And whenever I hear eye rolling, the most recent example that I think of that is how people felt about Forspoken and some of its dialogue and story-based options, where Frey just became obnoxious and unlikable and eye-rolling. But right when you think the reviewer is actually going to give his honest take on this plotline point, he kind of reels it back a little bit, saying that, but once that's over with, Legacy mostly redeems itself with a fantastic cast of non-painting characters that help boil things down into a not too convoluted good guys versus bad guys conflict that ends up being an enjoyable tale, even if it's not particularly profound or original. He can't even compliment this game without having a little bit of a slight at the end of each compliment. He does go on to say that most of the characters that you come across and most of the quests that are tied to those characters are exceptionally well written. The voice acting is well done, and overall, the plot points in those side missions is well done, more so than what the main story actually is. He then goes into complimenting the world building and immersion of the game, but also has a slight with the technical aspects of the game, saying that the immersion is occasionally broken up by Legacy's dicey performance, though, which suffered from just about every issue that makes IGN's performance review team cry during my time on the PS5. Mind you, this is exclusively a PS5 review of the game. The PC versions, from what I understand, are exacerbated a lot depending on what rig you have. But he goes on to say, the greatest hits include frame rate inconsistencies, weird issues where lighting switches from too dark to too bright, aggressive pop in while moving around the map quickly, specifically on the broomstick, and more. He then rounds this section out by saying that each door seems to have a small loading screen of 2 to 3 seconds every time you go to open it before you can get to whatever's on the other side, but then kind of tries to sugarcoat it by saying it's understandable since there's so much packed into this beast of an adventure. And I do want to highlight this point specifically because the whole point of the PS5 and it having that advanced SSD was supposed to make it so that loading screens were going to be a thing of the past, but it seems like every single version of this game, including the PS5 versions and the PC version, which if you have an SSD should be limited on its own, have this exact same issues. I have a feeling that this is a shader compilation thing where each door kind of is quickly compiling shaders for the next area, basically making it a mini load screen, and I do blame Unreal Engine mainly for this issue. But wait, there's more. He also goes on to say that there is quite a bit of glitching going on with the game, with you falling through the map being fairly commonplace, or things just kind of floating in place or popping in or out of existence based on how the camera looks at the room at the time. It also seems like it has some of that Bethesda jank to it, with sometimes you talking to an NPC and then them just kind of wandering away while still having that conversation with you. While they did say that nothing game-breaking happened to them in their time with the game, it was enough to break their immersion, and they did say it happened enough to be seen as irritating. Moving on to the gameplay aspects, the combat system is widely praised in this review, but the combat overall, as well as the enemies that you come up against, does get repetitive from what the reviewer states. While they did say that the combat never stopped being entertaining, the enemy variety being mostly dark wizards, goblins, spiders, and then a sprinkling of trolls or magic armor suits did start getting a bit tiresome. They then closed out the combat section while saying the spells are fun to combo together and try out different formations of spells. It is a bit clunky switching out those different combinations of spells, which I feel is more subjective to the player than anything, and I don't fault the game for that. They then go on to this whole paragraph about the exclusion of Quidditch and how it's wrote out of the story, saying that Quidditch is canceled for a year because some wizard injured themselves in the last season, and then go on to say that this is just a cover up for them just not having time to include it in the game. My belief is that it'll probably come out in a DLC, since there's no interactions with other players in this game. They're going to have a pretty deep system built out if they want to make Quidditch a PvP style experience, or if they just want to make it another PvE style side quest, a little bit of less work, but still there is going to be a lot of systems needed since flying around the broomstick seems pretty one-dimensional as a way of getting to point A to point B and not much else. And then closing out this review, they talk about the questing system in general. With over 100 side quests that are packed into the adventure, not all of these diversions are equally entertaining though, and some are definitely your basic go here and collect kill things objectives. The rewards for these quests are not actually the most exciting either according to the IGN review, with most of them just being stat-based changes based on whatever piece you get, and are more functional for a cosmetic sense than anything else, with you being able to fully transmog items from one look to another, making it so that your wizard can look as classy as possible. And it seems like a lot more effort was put into that than the actual RPG elements or build-based elements that the game could have possibly had. It's definitely an RPG light, according to the IGN review. They did have to put one damning stamp on this section though, saying that you'll be painfully disappointed by Legacy's abysmal inventory system, just closing out this section of the review. And with all of this scathing stuff coming out of the review, it reads more like a 7 according to IGN standards than what they ended up giving it, which was a 9 out of 10. And while I did skip over some of the more positive aspects that IGN put into this review, I will link it down below so you can read the full review for itself, because the entirety of the review does read like a 7 or less out of 10 game. Just so we're clear here, in IGN's own words, a 9 out of 10 is an amazing experience. We enthusiastically recommend that you add these games to your playlist. Hey, could be very true, especially depending on how much of a Harry Potter fan you are, which I do believe that the reviewer very much was. If we call a game amazing, that means something about it seriously impressed us, whether it's an inspired new idea or an exceptional take on an old one. We expect you to look back at one of the highlights of its time in gaming. This is all well and good, and I'm sure people that enjoy the Harry Potter franchise, or maybe even don't and have played this game, can give it similar sentiments, but based on the review that they wrote, this does not equal what they are saying a 9 out of 10 is. Allow me to bring you to a 7 out of 10 game based on IGN. A 7 out of 10. Good. Playing a good game is time well spent. Could it be better? Absolutely. Maybe it's a lack of ambition, story, too repetitive, combat and enemy variety, or has a few technical bumps in the road, such as all of the performance issues that they mentioned. But we came away happy from it nonetheless. We think you will too. It's when you put it into terms like this that the good and amazing do tend to outweigh whatever arbitrary number the game is actually being given. And I do want to give the reviewer for IGN credit. They gave a fair and unbiased written review of this game. I feel like they genuinely broke it down into pieces that people care about and need to know about. A lot better than what most of the other reviews I've seen out there, which are just praising the game based on the Harry Potter name alone and not really going over most of the technical issues, especially in the PC reviews. So for that, I want to give you props. You really did a good job on this review until you tripped it up at the finish line and gave it that 9 out of 10 that 9GN is known for. And with this instance in particular, I think it's more necessary now than ever for us as gamers to question these review sites, these articles, these people that we are giving our attention to give us a fair and unbiased review of a game, so that we might spend our dollar a little bit better. Games are going up in price. $70 is going to be the new norm for game, as Nintendo just showed Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom is going to follow that suit. So it is more and more important that fair and unbiased reviews exist. And honestly, as gamers, we shouldn't be taking one review site or even a handful of review sites word as gospel. We shouldn't just look at numbers and say, yes, this is worth my money. You should actively dive in and determine whether something is going to be worth investing in. Maybe you heard the Harry Potter name and you seeing reasonably favorable scores was all you needed. that is 100% fine. Maybe you are on the other side of things and you heard the Harry Potter name and this is just something that you do not have interest in, or maybe you actively are seeking to not buy it for whatever personal reasons you have. That is fine too. But at the end of the day, we do need to have a reasonable accountability for what we are basing opinions off of before we're able to get our hands on things. Gaming should not be a litmus test for somebody's agenda one way or the other. It should be about what matters, the game itself. I do feel like Hogwarts Legacy, more than any other game in recent memory, has pulled back the curtain on journalistic bias and really exposed gaming journalism for what it is, more so than it already has to itself. And it begs the question, what would have happened to some other games if they had a more notable name card to them? Would Forspoken have done better if it was tied to a massive name brand that was already positively received? But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you still use gaming journalism and reviews of this caliber to help determine your purchases? Do you go to alternative methods such as watching streamers play or YouTubers play these games? Or do you just kind of ride the lightning and get what you feel like? Because sometimes that's all right too. As always, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We will be having more conversations like this in the future. But until next time, Tenna Crew, much love. Bye-bye.